Well, aloha, and thank you for coming to TEDxWestminsterCollege. Today, I would like to talk to you about the concept of symbiosis, which is an important concept not only in the biological sciences, but also in applied ethics as well. Symbiosis is a key concept in the biological sciences. It refers to different species living together, or different organisms living together in the same environment. Now, there are a variety of different types of symbiosis, and you can see them here on the chart. Don't worry, we'll go through them one at a time in just a moment. The left-hand column shows the 6 different permutations of symbiosis. The middle column shows both pluses and minuses, and also shows a 0. The plus shows when an organism is benefited by the relationship. The minus shows when an organism is harmed by the relationship. And the 0 shows where an organism is neither benefited nor harmed by its relationship with the other organism. So let's look at some examples of different types of symbiosis in nature. Here we have, at the bottom left, the green anole, which is a type of lizard that's indigenous to the southwestern United States. To the right, we have the brown anole, which is a type of lizard that is indigenous to Cuba that has been brought into the United States as a type of pet, and well-meaning but environmentally ignorant pet owners will release them into the wild where they have bred. And this has led to a competitive relationship between these two closely related species of lizard. And hence we have competition, a minus-minus relationship in which both species are harmed by the interaction. They compete over habitat, they compete over food, and as a result, neither species is doing very well. Commensalism is the second type of symbiosis that we'll be examining. In an commensal relationship, we have one species or one organism that is neither harmed nor benefited, while those around it can suffer. This is a black walnut tree. A black walnut exudes a toxin from its roots that can seriously harm other forms of plant life. So for example, if a fern tries to take root at the base of the black walnut, it'll get killed and be unable to grow. This does not benefit the walnut in any way, shape, or form. It just happens to exude this toxin. So the walnut neither benefits nor is harmed, whereas the fern that tries to grow at its base is harmed. Next is agonism, or used to be known as antagonism. In these types of relationships, one species or one organism benefits while the other is directly harmed. Parasites are an excellent example of this. The dog, and the poor dog in this picture, is suffering immeasurably from flea bites. And so it itches, it might pick up diseases from the fleas, the bites might get infected. Meanwhile, the flea has this wonderful cozy habitat and a constant supply of doggy blood, so it's doing very well. Neutral relationships are those in which one species and another live in the same environment, but one does not benefit or harm the other and vice versa. It's actually kind of hard to find these in nature because nature is largely, as we'll see in a minute, interdependent. But one example might be a rabbit and a trout. They live in the same forest, but because they do not directly interact with one another, they really neither harm nor benefit one another. Next is a commensal relationship. With commensalism, we have something like the cattle egret and cattle. The cattle egrets follow cows around, and as the cows eat, they stir up insects, and the egret munches those up. So this doesn't benefit or harm the cow in any way, but the egret gets a free lunch and occasionally a perch, apparently. My favorite example, and the last type of symbiosis is mutualism. Now, here we have a boxer crab. A boxer crab has evolved to clutch a sea anemone in each one of its pincers. It uses these to hunt for food and to fend off predators. So the boxer crab essentially gets a bioweapon that it gets to carry around with it at all times. How does the anemone benefit? Well, crabs are messy eaters. It never sets the anemones down, so it's evolved to eat with its front legs. And all these particulates go out into the water and the anemone gets to gobble them up. And when the crab is remaining stationary and not actively eating, it kind of shucks and jives through the water, moving the anemones so that they pick up even more particulates. So the anemone gets a lot more food than it would get if it were just attached to a coral reef. Thus, the anemone benefits and the crab benefits. And this is the type of symbiosis we're going to be most interested in today. Now, symbiosis is a concept that's been applied also in business ethics. In 1987, Ryūzaburo Kaku, who is the chairman of Canon Incorporated, you may have seen their photocopiers and cameras and so on, used this principle as one of the foundational principles for the Caux Roundtable, which is essentially a conglomerate of international businesses that have voluntarily adopted these ethical principles as a way of doing business appropriately in a global marketplace. Now, the term Kyōsei is Japanese for symbiosis. It's composed of two characters, the first of which stands for working together. The second means life. And so Kaku likes to translate this as living and working together for a common purpose. So with Killsay, you try to develop mutualistic, symbiotic relationships with everyone with whom you do business. You're constantly striving to view business not as some type of zero-sum game where you profit at the expense of others, but instead something where everyone can synergistically work towards common goals and everyone can hopefully profit. The Caux Roundtable has used Killsay and a variety of other ethical principles to show how you can do business ethically in the 20th and 21st centuries. Now, one of the cornerstones of the Caux Roundtable Principles is this idea of stakeholder theory. If you look at the traditional view of management, it's what's known as shareholder theory. In shareholder theory, you have one and only one obligation: to maximize profit for the shareholders. And this is true to some limited extent. My retirement fund is wrapped up in stocks. I would like to think that those corporations are maximizing profit for me so that I can one day retire and not die at the chalkboard. However, there are other moral obligations that corporations have as well. They essentially have moral obligations to everyone who is a stakeholder in the corporation, everyone who is affected to some extent by the corporation. So this includes the shareholders. This also includes their employees, their customers, their suppliers, the people who live in the town where they have their factories. All of these are affected by the corporation. And so if a corporation strives to promote mutual benefit and welfare, to view these relationships as a type of mutualistic symbiosis where everyone can profit, then the corporation is going to thrive. It's also going to be around for the long haul. When was the last time you heard about a corporation going bankrupt or going to court because it treated its employees well and offered goods and services at a reasonable price, and so on? We might ask the question, does the environment count as a type of shareholder? Environmental ethicists for a long time have used the IPAT equation to describe how human impact can bring about positive or negative effects upon the environment. So the I stands for impact, and it's a function of three things: population, affluence, and technology. The more people there are, the greater stress we have upon natural resources. Affluence is a measure of our consumerism. Obviously, the more consumer lifestyle that we have, the more food we're going to need, the more water, the more fuel, and so on. Technology can be good or bad. If you rely on something like coal, oil, or nuclear power, it can have a negative effect on the environment. If you have something like solar or wind energy technology, it could benefit the environment. So this is how we can measure human impact on the environment. Now, this has implications for business and actually for national security as well. Environmental security is a fairly new branch of environmental studies that deals with the national security impact of environmental degradation. So we have here on the far left human activity, and that's the IPAT equation. All right, human activity is our population, our affluence, our technology. That can have a very specific environmental impact. If we have a high population, we have a lot of consumer countries that are degrading the environment, and we're using dirty technology, it leads to a negative environmental impact. That includes things like global warming, ozone layer depletion, soil erosion, degradation of arable land, acid rain, deforestation, loss of clean drinking water. So all of these things can cause harm to the environment. This leads to negative social effects. These negative environmental impacts can result in degradation of agriculture. They can destabilize economies. You get large groups of people, we call them environmental refugees, who are moving from areas where they no longer have food and clean drinking water or jobs or even places to live. They move to the areas where there are those things. And then you have to make room for them. And sometimes that involves crossing international boundaries. This destabilizes economies, it destabilizes political systems, and can potentially lead to warfare. The vast majority of wars fought throughout human history have been over natural resources. What do you think would happen if we ran out of oil? Would we just say, I guess we'll walk to work? No, we'd go get some. And this is where we have problems. Now we have two options. You can see the green box there, adaptive success. Here we take these challenges and we change the way that we do business. We change our laws and policies for the better, and we reach a tenuous equilibrium with the environment. And it creates what we call a feedback loop. The green arrow goes all the way back to human activity. And this changes the way that we act, which changes our impact on the environment, which changes the effect upon the economy and the political system, and it can be a positive loop, or the red arrow on the bottom, it can be adaptive failure. We just keep on business as usual, we keep harming the environment, it causes continual harm to the economy and to the political stability, and then this goes back and negatively feeds back into the system and creates more and more problems. So what are the lessons we take from this? What are the lessons of Killsay? Ultimately, we want governments and corporations to behave in mutualistically symbiotic relationships, where we try to creatively strive to promote the good of all of the stakeholders involved. Now, the Caux Roundtable Principles have been immensely successful within business, and it might be possible to take Killsay and expand it from just business ethics to create laws and policies that will allow us in all different walks of life to promote that type of mutualistic symbiosis. We have the power to change the world for the better if we view things as synergistic, mutually beneficial relationships. And ultimately, it's only by promoting the good of the environment and all of the people and beings within that environment that we can promote our own good. Thank you very much.